important in this room? We're the choir. We need to leave here and go out and make people understand what's at stake on November 6th. So we're not talking about the current generation. We're not even talking about the next generation. We're talking about generations to come if we get it wrong on November 6th. Not telling you who to vote for, although I have some very strong opinions. But I am telling you that you need to vote and that elections have consequences. And when you lose, you lose. So on behalf of our Congressional Black Caucus, which we don't do a great job of telling all our victories because we're busy working, but I'll just tell you a couple why elections make a difference. So in this past spending bill that the president woke up the next day and said, I don't think I should sign it. It's because we added $600 million to Pell Grants. We added almost $200 million for HBCUs. We added almost $1 billion for more affordable housing for seniors and other people. And to cap it off, we're doing another $1 billion for community health centers. So that's why who governs is so important. And I am in the South with a Democratic governor. The first act he signed was Medicaid expansion. And because of that, 400,000 new people have health care. And when you know Medicaid expansion, it's people who wake up and go to work every day. But it's had almost a $3 billion impact on our economy. So we're looking forward to you hearing from three exciting, extraordinary, and very smart people who have made history in their own right. And we're just happy to be a part of it. So thank you very much.
I want you to know that we're leaving this in the hands of Angela Rye. And Angela, she's a role model for all of our young people, so she's going to keep it going. But I always say this to the boys in the 5,000 role models, each and every one of them. Barack Obama. Now you remember now, he spent 2 years campaigning and 8 years in office, so that's 10 years. So that's all they've ever seen. So they just woke up one morning and then they saw this orange figure in the White House. And all of a sudden, this year, moving forward into their atmosphere is a man we call Mayor Andrew Gillum. All these children could see and think about was Barack Obama. So they went to the polls like crazy, and he won because of the young people. And then we all know what the NAACP stands for. So here we have what these children watching, they all know. So there's hope in a man called Ben Jealous, who was the NAACP president. And we're all talking about women. And you know, we kind of woke up on election day and thought we were going to have a female president of the United States, but the Russians came in and just messed that all up. So what do we find out? Now we have for governor, Miss Stacey Abrams. And not only vote, but you gotta support your candidates not only with votes, but you know what.
We the people!
Of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and to thank you for your attendance here today, to say that this is a historic event here today, because this is the new South that we are presenting.
That's right.
I'm a political scientist, so I am beside myself with being able to be a part of this event today, because as a political scientist, a black political scientist, you don't expect to meet three people who have made it this far running for governor in the South. So I'm very excited also because I am At present time, I'm the director of the Ron Walters Leadership and Public Policy Center at Howard University. And anybody who knew anything about Ron Walters, you know that he helped to set up the Congressional Black Caucus, and he would be very excited about studying what is happening in our states now. But I'm not going to take up time. I just want to mention that Congressional Black Caucus Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, so we cannot endorse candidates. So this is not an endorsement, but as a 501c3 organization, we can present you candidates. We can ask you to vote. We can ask you to supply money and support to candidates who are running. We just can't tell you who those candidates should be. So it is my pleasure now to introduce our moderator for the afternoon.
Sometimes. That's all right. So as Dr. Scott said, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and they cannot endorse candidates. But guess who can? So yes, this will not be an endorsement conversation, but in case you missed it, I support all three of these gubernatorial candidates because their competition is just it's absolutely no. So you all know this is also a live podcast recording for On One with Angela Rye. I don't know if there are any podcast listeners in the house. We're so excited to be starting our second season with these wonderful people. So I first want to give to you all my good friend. I've known him for 15 years. He started off in public service as a Student Government Association president at Gainesville High School. Then went on to become SGA president at Florida A&M University. He's a rattler. There's some rattlers in the building. Went on to become Tallahassee City Commissioner and now serves as the Tallahassee mayor and probably will be, I would say, almost likely, I'll say we'll go out and just go ahead and call him Governor Andrew Gillum.
I will.
Okay. Next up, we have someone who has now become a Time cover girl. She is the face, and I think Andrew kind of rode that wave of what's happening in the South. Stacey Abrams is someone who started with the New Georgia Project, ensuring that our voices will be heard. We'll talk more about that on this panel. Senate Minority Leader in Georgia. And then she went on to start running this campaign, talking to folks all over Georgia about the importance of affordable health care and signing folks up herself. She rolls up her sleeves and works every day tirelessly for us. And just like with Andrew, we can go ahead and say, the next governor of Georgia, ladies and gentlemen, Stacey Abrams. Is someone who we all saw really making change happen. First, as the NAACP president, he has a long resume that's amazing. Probably the most unconventional candidate up here because he hasn't served in public service. But how many of us know sometimes that's exactly what we need? Someone to change the face of things. He's running against an incumbent in Maryland, but he's run such a strong campaign, surprised a lot of folks. You all. But he learned a lot working with the NAACP. We know those chapters in our communities do so much for us every day. Ben Jealous was a big part of that. The next governor of Maryland, ladies and gentlemen, Benjamin Todd Jones. All right, well, let's get started. So first, clearly, I missed the Ride the Blue Wave memo today. Nobody wanted to tell me that this was the dress he was wearing.
Democrats.
They all have blue on in case you all are colorblind like some folks I know well. But I want to just start with something simple, but I think it's an important question. And Ben, I really want to start with you because as I said in your intro, you're the most unconventional candidate. You don't come from, I'm a lifelong politician, no shade. It's good. I'm glad you started at Gainesville High School in Interesting. But why politics? Why politics for you and why now?
When I left the NAACP, having served as their youngest president, my blood pressure was 180. And I didn't realize I had undiagnosed sleep apnea. And I figured it out. My blood pressure now is in the 120s. And the uprisings happened in Baltimore right around that time. And I found myself in the neighborhood where my mom grew up. And I realized that I've been blessed most of my life to do the thing I was best at, which is to pull people together to get big things done. And now that I had my health under control, I needed to get back to it. And so I'm running for governor because it's time for us to finally fully fund our schools, to make sure that we all have health care and we can afford it, and to get our economy going again. And as somebody who spent the last 5 years since I left the NAACP investing in startups, I know that our state has a much more robust future. And I'm eager to see it happen sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Stacey, what about you? Why politics? Not why now for you, but why politics? How did you get dragged into this mess?
So, first of all, I want to say thank you to Angela. Please join me in thanking Angela Rye. So I grew up in Mississippi. I like to say I'm Mississippi raised and Georgia grown. In Mississippi, my parents worked full-time and yet barely stayed above the poverty line. My mom liked to call us the genteel poor. We had no money, but we watched PBS and we read books. But my parents would make sure that we spent every Saturday in service. They would take us out to volunteer at soup kitchens and homeless shelters because they would say, look, having nothing is not an excuse for doing nothing. And that ethos has driven me my entire life, in part because I was really frustrated by the fact that my parents and my 5 brothers and sisters and myself, that we were the social action force for Gulfport, Mississippi. I'm like, this is very inefficient. Shouldn't someone else be doing this? And my parents said, that's called government. Government is supposed to do more to provide access, because I personally believe poverty is immoral, it's economically inefficient, and it is solvable. And that has to be how we approach our state. And so for me, politics became the only way to deliver on the promise of what good government can do. I started out as an attorney. I was then deputy city attorney for Atlanta. But what I found was that I couldn't make politicians do what I told them to. And so I became one myself. And the more I did that work, the more I realized that the job that can transform the lives of the incarcerated, the lives of the poor, those being pushed out of their communities by gentrification, those who haven't had health care in their lifetime, those who want to start a small business but can't get access to capital, all of those solutions rest in the hands of the governor of the state, and I want to be the person who delivers those solutions for Georgia.
So Andrew, I want to switch gears just a little bit, but on the same question, often when you're out stumping, you talk about pedigree. And you talk about you don't fit the pedigree or the mold, right? We know a lot of, at least the majority, white folks are a little richer when they get into politics, or they have some rich family members. We see that even in the Democratic Party. But you talk about being raised by a father who's a construction worker, a mother who's a school bus driver, and you don't come from the right pedigree. Given that, Andrew, you didn't pick a route where you would make a whole lot of money. You picked politics. Why do that?
I know, right?
Why you do that?
You sound like my wife.
That's my friend RJ. I got your back, girl.
She does, indeed. Can I just first say that I am overwhelmingly honored to be part of this panel and to have Angela Rye working us through this panel, Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, Sheila Jackson Lee, and Congressman Cedric Richmond, and to be amongst this talented, amazingly talented group of nominees of our respective parties to be governors of our respective states. It's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible. In fact, I don't think for a lot of us this moment and the significance of it will seep in until some time from now. But there were a lot of people who didn't think we deserved to be here. And some of that is our pedigree, and some of it is a little bit of something else. We won't talk about that.
Yes, we will.
Well, maybe we will. Angela is here. Cousin Angela's in the room. But Angela's right. I mean, I grew up in Miami-Dade, was born in Miami. I finished high school in Gainesville, Florida, and then I came to Tallahassee, Florida to attend my version of Hillman College, known as Florida A&M University. And I was one of 5 candidates in the Democratic primary, the only non-millionaire running for the Democratic
For the
primary.
brokest one.
To put it,
Brokest. Tell him how much you spent,
to put it differently, I was a broke one. In the race, Raisins spent about $6 million to the combined spending of my opponents combined of over $90 million. And we ended up winning that race. Don't let anybody tell you. Don't let anybody tell you. Don't let anybody tell you that you got to have the most money, or come from a certain background, or attend certain schools, or grow up on the right side of the track in order to be of service to people. You don't. You got to have a heart to care with. You got to have a willingness to make a difference. And you got to have a plan to get something done for somebody other than yourself.
Amen.
And that will take you a great distance. I think what voters saw was that I was willing to engage authentically, that I didn't have much to lose, and therefore I could run as myself. I didn't have to compromise my values. I didn't have to worry about somebody being disappointed because they had no expectations of me to begin with. This had to be me. And I just got to tell you that there's liberation in that. There's freedom in just being able to be yourself. And I think that made all the difference in the world for us in the primary. And I believe that that will be the ingredients that will get us across the top on November 6th to become the next governor.
Since Andrew said we're not talking about this, we're going to talk about this. I want us, in our authenticity, to talk about some of the barriers that existed even in the primary, because I think it's important that, Stacey's already laughing.
I know what you're about to say.
I think it's important that the party, this blue wave that's supposed to happen, understands this formula. And what I mean by this is you have 3 black gubernatorial candidates who were told they could not win, who were told they didn't have enough money, who were told that we're gonna run white Stacey over black Stacey, and so on and so forth. And so just for a moment, I know we have to unify, but in order to unify, first you gotta tell the truth. Right. So, to this very black room, I want you all to talk a little bit about what a winning formula looks like, even for statewide office, because Andrew says it, I think, best. It doesn't have to run as Republican light. So can you talk a little bit about your platforms and even some of the things that the party would have said, don't stand on that. Standing on that means you'll lose, stand your ground. Other things that you all are standing on and will continue to stand on going into the general. Sorry, it was kind of a speech. It's my soapbox question now.
So I'll start. As Angela pointed out, I did not look like my opponent, although we share the same first name. And at Netroots Nation, I made a comment in my speech. Look, I didn't have to change my hair, my skin color, or my gender to become the next governor of Georgia. And the importance of that is, look, I have natural hair. Since we're on a podcast, I am of a very rich brown hue.
The only thing I'm rich in.
I did not mean to go anywhere near this.
Y'all should know, Stacey and I have been friends since we were 20 years old. Wow. There's a whole lot of spades playing, a whole lot of trash talking. I'm restraining myself.
And Stacey, Ben just pulled I have black friends. That is what he said.
Angela's been waiting to pull my black card just so I can get president.
I have home training, so I'm going to get back to this stuff.
I know.
So, but the reason this matters is that, you know, certainly running as a black woman in the Deep South, running for an office that no Black woman has ever held, led a great deal of the traditional Democratic apparatus to assume I could not win. And then I exacerbated by talking about my brother who is in and out of prison and has bipolar disorder and needs help and needs support from our state. I've talked about the fact that I am broke. I actually make a pretty good living, but I'm responsible for my parents, for my niece who my parents adopted when she was 5 days old, for my grandmother who lives with them, and I owe the IRS $39,480. I paid a lot of it down. But I talk about it because you cannot have a conversation about how we help working families take care of themselves if you don't know what it means to be a working family. I talk ad nauseum about Medicaid expansion because one of the reasons I stepped up to take care of my parents, and I have amazing brothers and sisters, I just had the better salary. And we know that when one of us gets a job, we all get a good job. And I was able to step up when my parents would have been forced after Hurricane Katrina onto Medicaid. I would not let my parents lose their health insurance. And I've become their primary source of revenue outside of the jobs that they've had. And my parents are Methodist ministers now, so they're like permanently poor. But my point being that we have to understand, especially in our communities, that our expectations have to be calibrated to having people who know what our lives are like. You cannot solve a problem you don't understand. And while we don't have to have the exact same problems, we have to acknowledge the authenticity of the challenges we face, and you have to have solutions that are actually achievable in order to solve them. But what I think both Ben and Andrew did so spectacularly in their communities and in their campaigns is not only talk about the problem and talk about the solution, but we may not have the pedigrees that they expect, but we have the credentials for solutions that no other candidates like us have ever had.
So Ben, to you, I would ask the same question. Some of the things that maybe the establishment didn't expect for you to have, some of the challenges you've experienced, some of the challenges you'll face going into the general, or the
And I had to just explain to him, because he's like, what high school did you go to? I said, well, my mom desegregated Western High School for girls. Try to give him a clue where I was headed. And then I just had to make it plain. I said, look, I didn't have the opportunity to grow up here because my parents' marriage was against the law and it was illegal for them to return to the state. And I was shipped back here every summer because this is where home is and this is where my family is. And when your family's from West Baltimore, the one thing you never do is forget who your family is or where you're from, or what your responsibility is once you've done better, to make sure that everybody does better. And then they started asking questions, they're like, well, tell us about your success. I said, well, look, my mom grew up in the housing projects. I became a Rhodes Scholar. I can't explain how you get from one to the other without the unions that made sure that my grandparents had a good wage. Had enough money for me to go to college. I'm like, no, you're not supposed to mention unions if you're running for governor. South of the Mason-Dixon. Well, I've been a union member myself. It also helped me. And so I just said, look, I'm going to run as who I am, and if that's a little more complex than your picture of what a candidate for governor should be, so be it. Because all of us live lives that are way more complex than anybody's caricature.
Right.
But I'll be clear, I'm here to run for office because there's work that's undone that my family's been involved in for 80 years in Baltimore, to make sure the zip code does not determine your destiny. And as long as I have neighbors, as long as I have family members who feel like they're trapped in their zip code, I'll be doing the same work that my grandma did when she was a social worker in Maryland and helped train Barbara Mapolsky, and that's serving the people of our state and helping us all find our way to a better place.
There was a point in your campaign where another young Black man was shot in Florida, Marquise McLaughlin, and you started hammering hard on the importance of a state of emergency or emergency stay on the Stand Your Ground law, and how important it would be for you to repeal it as governor. There are a number, yes. There are a number of folks in the party, people who text message me like, tell your friend this is the death knell for his campaign. You know, because you were doing something for us so that your sons could survive in the state of Florida. Talk about why that was more important to you than getting that little nudge of support from the party.
Yeah, I mean, so, and there's a common theme, I think, in all of our stories, which is we didn't run from our stories and our experiences. It informed our public policy.
Yes.
Our lived experiences really informed it, and on Stand Your Ground, my position on it didn't change from when I spoke after the death of Trayvon Martin. We spoke up resoundingly. We said that Stand Your Ground law has no place in civilized society, and we didn't make apologies for it. But when this one came around, and again, I was in a 5-way race, so it was great to have the other fields start to speak out on these issues that we've been talking about for so long. It was strength and partnership. This one struck me a little bit differently because when Trayvon Martin happened, even though I myself am a black man, obviously, I didn't have 2 sons at the time. And so it really did hit me a little bit differently. And if you don't know the fact pattern of the case, Marquise McLaughlin was driving home with his partner, Brittany, and their 3 children. 1 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a few month old.
Their goal is to get us to go low when they go low. But we have to go high. And the reason we have to go high is because that's the way that you lead people out of where they're stuck right now. You travel, our state's really in 4 states. We got Western Maryland, we got the Eastern Shore, we got the Baltimore region, you have the DC suburbs of the state. And when you listen to families of all colors, of every faith in each of those regions, 80-85% of their issues are the same. And we just have to understand that, you know, race is used as a tool to divide us. My grandma's family's been in this region for like almost 400 years. She descends from Thomas Jefferson's grandmother's other grandchildren that were her slaves. And she would always remind me, she said, baby, you know, before there were slave rebellions, there were colonial rebellions, and there were African slaves and Irish indentured servants rebelling together. And the first was in Gloucester, Virginia, and what sparked it was an edict from the king to the governor, to the people on that dock where they rebelled. It said, in summary, and your status shall convey to your children. In other words, in the very beginning of the American experiment, we at the bottom of the pyramid of our economy were always willing to endure a lot, so long as we could hope that our children might be better off.
And I want to continue to stand with him because in many ways he is exactly what Alabama has to have, but we cannot live on memory. We have to live on progress.
Yeah.
And there is no progress to be made with the confirmation of a man who will strip the rights of women from them, especially black women who are hanging on to reproductive rights by the very thinnest of nails. That cannot be allowed.
No, so I align myself with the comments of my colleagues, but what I was going to try to relate this to is the fact that Senator Jones is, I think, in some ways operating from the old playbook around electoral politics.
Yeah.
And it's the same playbook that has been pervasive, I think, in our states. The going philosophy is in order to win, you got to be Republican light. In order to win a state like any of ours, you can't talk too much about poverty, about criminal justice reform. God knows, avoid entitlements at every opportunity. Don't get too close to this demographic or that demographic, that you kind of have to walk this straight, not too controversial line, if you will. And I think what we're trying to prove in our races is that you can talk about poverty and criminal justice reform and paying teachers what they're worth and corporate tax rate and all of these other issues that frankly matter. And guess what? You give voters a reason to go out and vote for something and not just against something.
Amen.
Right? And I think that's where that's how we're going to win, and I believe we will. The way we are going to win is by going to voters and telling them that not only do we see them and that we hear them, but we have a plan to do do something about their condition, their situation, their circumstances. The candidates that are the ones that have to play these close margins, who have to be unoffensive and basically shrink from who they are playing with the marbles that are on the table. We're trying to bring more marbles to the game by bringing and engaging those voters who, between 2012 and 2016, we had what? How many tens of millions that didn't vote between 6 million. There were 6 million fewer voters in the 16 election than there were in the 12. Fewer than half the people in this country are voting. Now I have to believe that part of that is they're not seeing themselves reflected. They don't hear the issues that they care about. They don't trust the elected officials who are before them to deliver on the promises that they're making. And so they choose not to turn out. And some of that might be is that the difference between the Democrat and the Republican are so minuscule that you might as well let it go. There'll be no difference. And so we're actually running on a belief that if we say who we are, what we believe, even for voters who don't agree with us 100% of the time, they'll be with us because they believe we believe in what it is.
One example of that, I talked about gun safety and responsible gun ownership. And I celebrated the fact I've only gotten D's and F's from the NRA. But I also told them, look, I learned how to shoot a shotgun from my grandmother, my great-grandmother, Moo Moo. I know how to shoot a shotgun, which means I know you don't point it at someone in a commercial. I know your behavior.
Her opponent did that.
Yes. But a lot of folks, in fact, it is a constant conversation that I am breaking all of the rules of being a Southern Democrat by talking about gun safety. My question is, why aren't you? When children have to be in active shooter drills in America, that's a problem.
And because I have that conversation, I can have conversations with people who never thought they would vote for a Democrat, but they will vote for someone who says, I will save your child's life. That is how we win elections, by having, as Andrew said, having authentic conversations where I'm not afraid. I voted enough times against gun laws that I couldn't fake it if I wanted to. And so why not embrace wholeheartedly who I am? And
7 points behind my opponent, and we finished 4 points ahead. I didn't close the gap by 11 overnight, right? There was something sitting sediment there that wasn't getting captured in the mix, right? But we also know that we've seen polls circa 2016 that had one candidate winning the night before. But as the community, you all have to, you got to put the line in the sand.
Right.
You got to say, if you do that again, we're going to, look, we're going to show out in ways that you've never seen us show out before. That's what our response has to be. I'm not talking about physical anything. I'm taking physical contact with the ballot. And moving some other people and making sure that people know that their parameters say that you don't get to go beyond. But I'm also reminded through the example of President Obama and First Lady Obama is that they were governing for the ages. As the first, they recognized that they were being measured and monitored not just in the moment that they were in, but by their example, they created the possibility for just an election cycle later for 3 African Americans to become Democratic nominees of major states in the United States for the ages. So we got races to win, so we try to stay focused on the present, the here and the now, but in the recesses of my mind, I am very clear about what this race means for my children and the children whose names I can't call, right? Whose faces I won't recognize. And neighborhoods that they may never have the opportunity to physically rub shoulders with me or for our hands to touch or cross, but I know what our race means to them.
Right.
And for their futures. And so, I'm so determined, y'all. I'm so determined around what we've got to do to win these races. And it's a big burden, it's a significant one. It's one that's not lost on me, but it's one that we've got to remember again in the recesses of our mind, but go to work right now, today, doing everything that we can to win these races so that we can change society. It's the bigger win.
You know, 1988, I was 15 years old. I was a precinct captain for Jesse Jackson. 2008, buddy of mine and I, we raised about $12 million to help Obama win the primary states. Here we are in 2018. And it's clear that we stand on the shoulders of a lot of folks who have come before us. I was on the phone with Deval Patrick the other day. And Jesse Brown, when he went down to the shipyards, he had an LGBT formation inside the Rainbow Coalition when that was still taboo in the Democratic Party as a whole. And that's really, yes, there's so many shoulders we stand on in our community, absolutely. But we also stand on the shoulders of a whole rainbow of people across our country who understand in their soul that we could be leaping forward if we were simply willing to come across all those lines they say are supposed to divide us. I don't think it's any mistake that we're all Generation X, or Andrew might be on the borderline, I'm not sure. But we grew up as part of a generation where we were blessed to simply be more inclusive than any generation that came before us. And also see example after example from Doug Wilder and David Dickens and Harold Washington all the way forward. And that's why I want to take a moment also just to, because I did at the beginning, just to say thank you to the congresspeople who spoke before us, Congresswoman Wilson, Congressman Jackson Lee, Congressman Richmond, and also Dr. Elsie Scott. Earlier then, 25 years ago, that all our generation needed to focus on was leading this country, leading our states, leading our cities, because the voters were way ahead of where the politicians were. Dr. Walters was right. He's no longer with us. I want to thank Dr. Scott for continuing his tradition. Thank him for all he did in this town at Howard University, at the University of Maryland, to inspire generations of folks. This country has no idea just about what's about to happen as far as the transformation of leadership. We've had the first trans candidate win in Maryland, first trans candidate win in Virginia. They stand on Doug Wilder's shoulders too. And we stand on their shoulders. Because our country is healing right now. Even as Donald Trump tries to divide us, let us never forget that he represents a minority of the country, a backwards way of thinking, and we represent the majority of the country that's intent on going forward.
Okay, so as we get ready to wrap up, I want to take you all to November 6th, 2018. And the polling results are starting to come in. And it's looking really good. You all get favorable results. You go out to give your acceptance speeches. But before you speak, what is the song that plays? And don't just name the song, give us a little bit, since they think we tap dance anyway, Stacey. Give them a little bit.
I'll start. It's gonna be Amazing Grace.
Stacey, you're not gonna sing that? How you gonna say walking like it's like calm down, guys?
No,
Calm down.
we adopted it.
What happened?
We adopted it.
Second black card revocation moment of the day, Andrew.
Aha. But walk it like I talk it, and we just sort of accidented upon that over the course of the trail. We were in a debate, and everybody's talking around in circles, and I was trying to think of a way to communicate the essence of who I was without having to do a diatribe. And I just said simply, I walk it like I talk it. And part of, and it sounds obviously real silly, but part of it for me is when we talk about access and affordability to healthcare for all, for me that's not a talking point, because I knew what it meant to wait for the mobile dental clinic to come through the neighborhood in order to have my teeth cleaned. When I talk about people being able to work one job instead of multiple jobs as a way to make ends meet, I'm reminded of my mother, who was a school bus driver, my dad, who was a construction worker, and when Florida got rid of mandatory summer schools, my mother became a presser in the dry cleaners, and then she would clean houses on the weekend. I remember watching my mother and father trade between which bills they could pay before something got cut off. When I talk about education and paying teachers what they're worth, I'm constantly reminded of the words of the educators that I encountered along my way, who told me I could when I thought I had reached my limits. The ones who told me that they thought I was smart and that I should take honors or AP courses. These are the people who, in my opinion, do the most difficult work that exists on earth.
Amen.
The shaping, the molding, the inspiring the minds of our most precious gifts, our children. And so I think part of the secret, if there is a secret as to why we were able to break through all the noise in our respective primaries and are now well positioned to be governors of our respective states, is that, yes, we walked it like we talked it, but more than anything, it is that this is a real lived experience. We don't need anybody to do a poll. We don't need a messaging expert. I don't need somebody to hold a thermometer up to the air and tell me what the temperature is.
It's too hot.
I know it's too hot, but I know it because I've lived it.
Yeah.
And once you've lived it, you can't tell me anything, right? And that's the kind of, I think, fervor and passion and lived experiences that are going to be required, because we're going to run up against some obstacles as we seek to govern. And if we can't remind ourselves of why we are here,
Amen,
or why we are so fully committed to this work, if we can't access that in our hearts and in our minds and our memories and our family and our stories, man, we don't stand a chance up against the opposition, who is prepared to be obstructionist. We'll have to tap into that to push past that. And so walk it like I talk it is what it is, and I'm not dancing up here on this stage. My opponent's next commercial against me.
Well, okay. Yes, Ben, back on.
Yeah, back to the church. Out of the Miami clubs. Back to St. James Church in West Baltimore. I was so surprised when you said Miami, how much of this crowd went crazy?
It's hosted by
40 miles from Baltimore and like 450 miles from Miami. And
it's hosted by the Congresswoman from Miami.
yes,
Yeah.
indeed, of course. No, look, there's a song that I'll be playing backstage. I'm getting ready to walk out, and it'll be This Little Light of Mine.
What?
It was the song that my mom sung to give her courage before she desegregated her high school. It was the song that my dad sung as one of the few white guys repeatedly jailed in downtown Baltimore in the efforts to desegregate the lunch counters in his jail cell. It's this song that I taught to many of the young staff of the NAACP who didn't grow up singing spirituals, movement songs, as we stood at the center of the aspirations of the combined civil rights community in Maryland and a much broader set of communities in 2012, when we decided that that would be the year we abolished the death penalty. That would be the year we passed marriage equality. That would be the year that we passed the DREAM Act. That would be the year that we got gun safety reform. And despite every other state in the region losing its mind, that would be the year that we advanced voting rights even further. And we all came together and we declared the motto of the Three Musketeers, all for one and one for all, stretched beyond our comfort zones. And that year we became the first state south of the Mason-Dixon to abolish the death penalty, the first state to pass marriage equality, the first state to pass the DREAM Act, and we did all of them at the same time. But it was all of us bringing our little lights together. And whenever I stand on the first day of school shaking hands like I just did, I did it last year too, I see those little kids and I just see my mom, walking in, just humming that to herself. She had to go past picket signs and protests just to go to high school. And I think if we are known for one thing at the end of those first 4 years, it has to be massively increasing funding for our schools, making sure teachers get a raise. And I know, as a guy whose mom was sued her high school when she was 12 to desegregate it when she was 15, that the one thing I'm going to get done as governor, if nothing else, is to make sure I finish that fight my mama started, so that no kid is discriminated against in their education based on what zip code they're born in.
This has been amazing. Thank you all so much. We need you to make history for the culture. And we are with you. We are going to fight for you. Take it to the mat. Take it to the Twitter. Get at me, dog. And
Make a contribution.
Yes, yes. Make sure you're registering voters before the deadline. Make sure you take folks to early vote. Make sure that you are speaking them up. Don't just take selfies. Make sure you post them on social media.
Thank you.